And welcome everyone to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. As always, we're here to keep you up to date with the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing. And as always, my co-host is a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He's the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Mr. Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And can I say it's also a pleasure to spend time with a man who's also on a mission to keep marketing simple, the voice of the Marketing and Finance podcast and the host of the Roger video series. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you, Pascal. And we are here for episode number 30, and we've got a fabulous show for you today. One of my favourite films is in the film marketing section, and we've got a lot to get through before we get to that, but I'm so excited about the film that we're going to be talking about today. So shall we get into the first part of the show, Pascal? Let's head into the news.
YouTube will expand its tipping tool called Applause to more channels, letting users donate to creators during live streams.
And staying with YouTube, its Shorts feature, which is effectively a TikTok clone with 3.5 billion daily views, is actually to arrive in the US this March. Up till now, it's only been available in India.
Wow, well, Accor launches All Connect, a hybrid hotel business meeting concept combining physical in-hotel meetings with virtual interactions in partnership with Microsoft Teams.
The Norwegian video meeting platform Whereby pledged to plant up to 1 million trees, one for every 3 meetings hosted in February in support of the Eden Reforestation Project.
Well, according to new research from buyacar.co.uk, car dealers should brace themselves for a spike in demand for new and used models when lockdown ends.
The National Lottery's decision to invest heavily in marketing over the past 3 years and throughout the pandemic is starting to pay dividends, according to its CMO, Keith Moore.
Google Maps is testing a couple of new useful features in the US, paying for parking in over 400 cities or buying a train ticket directly from the app.
And finally, the horrific Weetabix baked beans tweet prompted hilarious brand pile-ons, effectively other brands offering their own take on the original tweet. This is a perfect example of probably accidental viral marketing. Shall we start with the Weetabix tweet, Pascal?
Yes, please.
Have you actually seen it?
Yes, and I did shudder in horror and recoiled in horror as I saw the image.
And it's really interesting, as the news item said, lots of other brands, and not just food brands. I've seen car ads. I think I even saw L'Oreal, the shampoo brand, piling in with their own take of the Weetabix tweet. But of course, using the same hashtag and the same sort of language. So whether Weetabix knew that this was going to happen or not, in which case it's an absolute genius piece of marketing, or whether it was a total and utter fluke, it's absolutely gone global. This has absolutely taken off. So it just goes to show viral marketing can work. I'm just not convinced that you can actually do it on purpose.
I would agree with you. I mean, most of the examples that people always cite, as a case study or the example to follow, they always seem to assume this intent, and I think it was more obviously the Weetabix brand thinking what would be a fun thing to do to lighten the tone whilst the world and particularly the UK is in lockdown. And I'm sure they wanted their own audience to enjoy and have a smile when they saw the image and get a reaction. It's a bit like Marmite, isn't it? You're in, you're out.
Yeah.
But I don't suspect they sat in that meeting room or that Zoom or Teams meeting session to say, and next stage will be when the other brands copy us. I think that's been essentially a delightful surprise to them too.
I think you're right. And in the news this week, there was 2 items about YouTube, and I deliberately kept both of them in because something that I'm going to say in the tech section of the show later really applies to these 2 pieces of news. But it's quite interesting that YouTube are going to be introducing this ability for people to effectively give you money for your videos direct in the channel. Now, obviously, some people who have successful YouTube channels often use something called Patreon to effectively get people to subscribe and maybe pay them a $5 a month or something like that. But from what I can work out, this will be the ability for a watcher of a video, in the same way as pressing a like button, you'll be able to clap and give them a donation, and it could be $1, could be $10, whatever you feel.
And from memory, this is the third news item that has a link to donation. And it feels like it's going to become a more, feature for platforms out there. And the novelty is going to be gone completely. And for me, it's kind of, why not? Why not have different levels of showing your appreciation? And I know that on occasion you talked about the coffee jar and that kind of things. But we've got the likes, we've got the comments, we've got the share. But for people where you can really tell that there is a lot of work gone into it, or there's a cost to the production of what they do, why not, by extension, become a micro executive producer and share, £2 or $10 for that matter?
Agreed. And the second YouTube bit of news was this thing they call Shorts, which is effectively their version of TikTok, which is, we've seen the stories type thing flooding across the social media platforms at the moment. Ironically, you would have thought that YouTube might have been the pioneer of this sort of thing, but even they are playing catch up. And apparently it's been going down really well in India, and now they're going to roll it out obviously to America. We'll probably get it in the UK later in the year, I guess.
Absolutely. It's a tricky one because the TikTok type content, which I know on Instagram they're trying with Reels, it feels to me like it belongs to the TikTok kind of environment. And YouTube, the number 2, if not number 1 in some nations, search engine for information, for education and knowledge. I just don't know where Shorts is going to fit in, but, time will tell.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And again, it's something we keep coming back to on the show, isn't it, Pascal? But again, why does everybody want to aspire to be exactly the same as everybody else? Now, the last thing I thought we'd talk about today was this Accor, the hotel chain, and this concept of All Connect, whereby they are effectively planning ahead to when the pandemic lockdown is gone. I think that they are very clever here by thinking, do you know what? People are always now going to want some sort of virtual aspect to meetings going forward. And we already said that some companies have decided that even after the lockdown lifts, they're not going to be spending as much on travel for events and such like. So by putting the kit into their hotel meeting rooms now, so that when people come back and they may have 10 people in a room as opposed to 30 people in a room, and the other 20 will be somewhere else, but they'll be able to be beamed in on a big high quality HD screen with really high quality cameras. I think it's a very shrewd move.
And you know what's interesting? So 2 things. I'm a big fan of the Accor brands and actually a group of companies. When I used to work back in corporates, I used to insist that if I was in London or anywhere, I would have an Accor hotel with Ibis or Sofitel and the others. People thought it was because of the continental breakfast, Roger, but actually it was because of the TV channels, because you were guaranteed if you went to an Ibis hotel that there would be some French movies and TV series, so I could play catch up. My reaction initially, Roger, interestingly, was that I thought this was a non-use. This was like a so what moment. But then, like you, when you sit back and reflect, saying, well, actually, no, what they're doing is taking the initiative on the trend that is around the corner, barely a few months, where not everyone will be able to travel to begin with, then willing to travel. And why not actually take the initiative and actually clearly state your case? Because I think sometimes all of us in business, no matter whether you are on your own as a solopreneur or a big corporate, we will make assumptions about what our customers understand and remember about what we are. So, case in point, someone could have said, well, we have meeting rooms, we have conference room, they will come and book them. Let's wait and see. But actually, by taking the initiative and releasing this news item about this is what we're doing, and it has a name, All Connect, and it has this, it has that, I think it's actually very clever indeed. You're right.
Yeah. So another fabulous set of news items for us to get our teeth into this week, Pascal. But I think it's time to move on. And the next section of the show is the Content Spotlights. Well, in this part of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table an item of content. It could be an article, video, webinar, something that we've seen during the last week which grabs our attention. And the great thing about it is we don't share that piece of content in advance, so it's always a bit of a surprise. So Pascal, hit me with what you've got this week.
So this week I've gone for a video, Roger. A video produced by a gentleman that you remember from a few years ago called Phil Pallen. Now, you and I met Phil at a New Media Expo all those years ago. I'm going to argue, Roger, that everything began at a New Media Expo in Manchester many, many years ago. So once again, we've said before, big thank you to Mike and Isabella to creating this movement for that content creation community. Now, Phil Pallen and I are connected through, the marketing. I wouldn't say we're close acquaintances, but we always wave to each other from, across the interweb. And I just love what he does as a personal brand coach, as a visual marketer in terms of the advice and so on. I must confess, I was very tempted to actually add Phil to the content creators shoutouts, but that video was worthy of content spotlight. The video is entitled "How to Grow Organically on Instagram in 2021." And there's two reasons why I wanted to bring it to your attention, and that to our viewers and listeners, is number one, it's a wonderful example of how to produce a video for YouTube. And you could study essentially the way in which Phil does the introduction, the way he does the closing statements, the different way in which it's edited, elements within the video. It's just a great study of how to do it, but also it's great advice in terms of growing your audience on Instagram. I would argue beyond. I think the advice within that is valid for all social networks. What is interesting is that this video is in fact a 10-minute summary, a 10-minute kind of study of a long video that he produced on IGTV, where he had an expert guest called Marketing Harry, kind of a superhero name, and he wanted to revisit, that video to essentially give you a summary. And of course, if you wanted to, you could watch the full version by clicking on the link in the description on the YouTube channel. So to me, that's that. It's a wonderful example of creating a video. It's a great way to also repurpose what's already out there, but by adding value. And of course, I'm going to give you now the top tips to grow your Instagram following organically. So number one advice, which I think will resonate with you, Roger, is simply posting on Instagram to then hope for the audience to grow is really, really not where we're at in 2021. The way to grow an audience is not just to post and wait for things to happen. You have to post by all means, but you've got to engage and react to comments. So you've got to be present. And that kind of your presence would also make sure that through the engagement, you are featured on the suggested for you and the explore tabs on Instagram, which is a big, big part of how you can be discovered. Then number two, because you're going to be more present on Instagram, then you're going to be inspired by what you observe, and out of that you can come up with your own compelling content. So, there's a fine line between inspiration and plagiarism, and it's asking you to be very, very careful. But again, you will not come up with good content tidy by not being active on Instagram, which I think plays to number one, which is to post and go is not where we're at really. Find ways and take the initiative to really encourage people to visit your profile to get more clicks on that follow button is number three advice, which I think makes sense. And we've seen many examples of that. Now, this one is interesting to me because for some platform that might be contrary to the advice that you hear out there, but try multiple strategies at the same time to get the engagement as opposed to one after the other. So for example, try at the same time diverse range of content. At the same time, collaborate with other content creators. At the same time, interact with lives, with hashtags, and with posts from across your industry. So really quite a chunky bit of work there with that element of trying different things at the same time. And finally, the best advice, which I think is the one that we share a lot on social media, remember that the content ultimately has to focus on what matters to your audience. So what are their needs? What is a challenge that is maybe an obstacle to those needs? And what is the advice you can share? It has a final bit of advice for people who are working on Instagram. enjoy the journey and enjoy the moment, because this is a lot of work. Success will not happen overnight, but if you're consistent and you enjoy the process, which others can tell, then this is how you can grow your following on Instagram organically. But to me, having shared all that advice to you, what I'm taking away from Phil, which I'm not surprised, if you really want to get the success that you deserve on Instagram, you've got to work at it. And that plays to the advice that you and I have shared many times. Maybe you're better off just working on Instagram and not on multiple platforms at the same time.
I mean, this is absolutely spot on, and Phil's a great guy, and I will watch this video. I find Instagram perplexing, to be perfectly honest, and this does reinforce the fact that, as you say, it's a lot of work. I mean, gone are the days when Instagram was all about taking a pretty photo, posting it with a comment and putting a load of hashtags in. The algorithm changes so much. I don't know whether Instagram is a photo platform anymore, or whether you're supposed to focus on doing reels, or whether you're supposed to focus on IGTV, or whether, as you say, and as Phil says in his video here, that you've got to do a bit of everything. But if you've got to do a bit of everything and play effectively 3 games within one, as you say, it's a lot to do, isn't it? It's a lot of work. And, if you really are going to be successful on Instagram, I think you have got to put that work in and understand that it's probably going to take you quite a long time to build the following, I would guess.
And for that point of view, so if you look at your, what I call the time budget, Roger, maybe the decision is, I need to just let go of Twitter. Maybe I need to let go of, other aspirations I had for this Instagram strategy to work. And for me, the advice I'd love to hear is this idea of be present, engage, and collaborate with others. It's not just I get it, it's very appealing, this idea, Roger, of post something, no matter where it is, but would say Instagram, and then something will come to you somehow. I think, the posting is just the beginning of a series of activity, which includes just engaging, reacting, and collaborating with others. And I just thought it was great. And just to remind you as well, Roger, the way in which this video is produced, do watch it, because there's snippets from IGTV, there's some graphics overlay, there's some great stuff that is done that is also what you can learn from.
Fantastic. I'm going to do that because I'm always looking for tips for video production, as you know. So, Pascal, a little bit of an apology. I've picked another article by Mark Ritson for my content spotlight this week. I tried very hard, but once again, the headline grabbed my attention. And I started reading the article and I thought, it's got to be. It's got to be. Now, the heading of this article is, "If an influencer's what you want, find a 90-year-old with bad Wi-Fi." Now, great headline, isn't it? Absolutely great headline.
All is forgiven, Roger.
All is forgiven. Now, the thing is, we've talked about influencers on the show a few times over the last few episodes, and both of us have this opinion that, well, anybody can be an influencer. We're influencers within our smallish circle of colleagues and friends, I guess, and you can be an influencer without having millions and millions of followers on Instagram. But I think that the world thinks of influencers as people who have millions and millions of followers on Instagram and probably sit on beaches in Dubai during lockdowns when the rest of us aren't allowed or aren't supposed to travel. But what really made me laugh about this article is that not only does it prove that anybody can be an influencer, it also teaches us some really important lessons about marketing. So very, very briefly, the story is that AT&T, which is one of the internet service providers in America, have been doing a lot of advertising recently across the whole of the US, boasting about their high Wi-Fi speeds. We're talking about 300 megabits per second, that sort of level. Now, there's a gentleman in Hollywood is not getting anywhere near those speeds. In fact, he's using speed testing equipment, and sometimes it's as low as 3 megabits per second as opposed to 300. And he says it's absolutely impossible to do anything other than just surf text-based pages or download emails. He certainly can't watch Netflix or anything like that. And apparently he's complained to AT&T loads of times and nothing's happened for a long time, and yet they're still putting all of these adverts out on TV. So what he did, and he had to pay for this, he took out an advert in a newspaper. Do you remember newspapers?
I do.
A real proper paper newspaper. And basically he called out the CEO of AT&T. And as you would expect, just like the Weetabix tweet, this advert got picked up by pretty much every TV news channel in America. And before long, this guy, and I should have said he's 90 years old, as the headline of the article says, he's 90 years old, was being interviewed on all the breakfast shows across the States. And can you imagine when the CEO of AT&T got his morning roundup of the news and they were plastered all across it? Now, as you would expect, within hours there was a crew round digging up the road, installing fibre optic into the road where this gentleman lived, and within 24 hours the guy had the internet speeds that he was expecting, and he's a happy chap. But isn't that just amazing? This guy has become more of an influencer at the age of 90 than many other people with millions of followers on Instagram. And the two lessons that Mark effectively draws out of this, well, there's probably three. And the first lesson is the one that we've been saying all the time, is that you don't have to be somebody with all those followers on Instagram. You just need to have some knowledge or power, I guess, in your particular niche or industry. The second one, though, is don't underestimate the power of the news media. And marketers do that a lot of the time. I guess we would call it PR, wouldn't we? But a lot of people these days go straight to Twitter, they go straight to Instagram, they go straight to Facebook. And, you see people say, oh, news media's dead. Newspapers, definitely paper versions of newspapers are dead. But just imagine, had this 90-year-old gone to Twitter and complained about it, it would have been picked up by somebody on their Twitter customer services team. They'll have probably responded to him and said, sorry about that, we'll send somebody around to fix it. And nobody else in the world would have known it. But this guy took out a paper advert in a paper, and he got his face on pretty much all of the breakfast TV shows in America. So, wow, that's how to become an influencer. And I guess the second lesson, and again, this is so obvious, Pascal, is marketing isn't just about communicating to your customers, which is what AT&T are constantly doing with their adverts, boasting about their constantly high speeds. What they weren't doing is actually listening to what their customers were telling them about the reality of the speeds, and that's what got them into serious trouble. So I'm sorry about using another article by Mark Ritson.
Yes, I mean, Mark, if you keep using headlines and titles like this, it's very, very difficult. But we should try and find a way one day to invite him as a special guest in return for all the many articles we've reviewed. But, I can't help, I hope you don't mind, Roger, but this to me has so much in terms of echo of Three Billboards outside Ebbing. In terms of the kind of juxtaposition, I love the idea of using kind of analog media, as some people have been saying in jest. But also, you're right, this idea of, I'm sure the gentleman didn't go from zero to the newspaper advert. He probably has tried many times to get in touch with somebody, and nobody was listening, and he could see the adverts on TV, and everybody was thinking, well, that's just not right. But more importantly, and I think that's where people sometimes get it wrong, whilst he is an influencer, what has worked is the network, in this case news media, supporting him. And I think too often, the term influencers use about that single entity, that single person that somehow is making everything happen almost automatically, where in fact, real influencers, they have a network and they use a network to their advantage. Well, superb choice, Roger, and I'm sure that viewers and listeners will be chuckling. Now, do you think that back to the Weetabix example that we're going to see more, of our elders then going to the newspapers and advert complaining about another form of public service or utility?
Well, you never know. It might be the next big thing, mightn't it? Maybe these people be on TikTok before we know it, Pascal. Oh, great content spotlights, and all that technology involved in getting this 90-year-old gentleman on TV gives us a great way of segueing into the next section of the show, which is marketing tech and apps. And in this section of the show, Pascal and I talk about some marketing technology, some marketing apps that we've come across over the last few weeks, and we, again, surprise each other with what we've got on the table. Pascal, what have you got for us this week?
So, Roger, I want to continue this journey of rediscovery about creating a better online experience when delivering webinars, presentations, or simply one-to-one coaching. And I'm talking a lot about the visual stimuli that we can use as part of the platform that we use. So I began last week, as you may remember, and I want to continue with from moving to moving images. I started with static images. I want to move to moving images. And you reminded me of a platform that I discovered some time ago but forgot last week. There is a website called Mixkit. You remember you mentioned that to us last time? Mixkit.co, and they have a free stock video feature. So whilst you can certainly find free stock videos on the likes of Pexel's videos and Pixabay and a few others, what I like about Mixkit.co/free-stock-video, I've done my research, I've checked them out, and they are very different to the other platforms. So again, if you want to be a bit different and avoid the situations of saying, I've seen this before, that could be a great platform to use for transitions in between maybe some of the training modules or something like this, so you can have it as a backdrop. If you're doing a keynote presentation, you could have a time lapse maybe behind you and so on. There's some lovely ways again to create just a bit more interesting online experience. And then the other platform that also offers you some videos, sometime more for a backdrop, I would say, is cover.co. So cover spelled with 2 R's.co. Again, free to open an account, and you can download some free stock video footage to illustrate your next keynote presentation or webinars. And you and I have mentioned this before, relating our own experience, but bringing people like Drew Davis and many others. We are seeing now the convergence more and more of public speaking, event management, but also media production. Those three kind of talents and skill set coming together, and you need to find ways to have at your fingertips, what I call your virtual support, which will, in this case, will come from Mixkit and Cover with 2 R's.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and funnily enough, I was watching another of Drew Davis's videos this week, and he was actually telling the story in his video of a New York entrepreneur. And it's quite obvious that he downloaded some stock footage from somewhere like Mixkit or Cover or Pexels and Pixabay, which we've mentioned before, and incorporated it within the video. And even though it was only on the screen for probably less than 2 seconds, if that, it just adds to the variety, and it makes the video pop, and it makes it stand out. And it's well worth taking the time, isn't it, Pascal, to research these sites and find something that's just going to make your audience sit up and think, oh, he cares about what we are experiencing.
For me, very quickly, it's a bit like if you want to put together a presentation using PowerPoint, you're not going to be using the template given to you by Microsoft. So you're going to try and find a way to express yourself as uniquely as you are. And I think those many platforms are there to help you with that.
Yeah, So I can sort of carry this conversation on into my piece of tech this week. Now, we have mentioned this on the show before, probably well over 10 episodes ago, possibly more, and it's a video live streaming production platform called Haps. Now, the first time I mentioned it, I hadn't used it, and I think if I remember back, the reason I mentioned it was because they have a different angle to things like YouTube, in that they are encouraging their creators to be almost like journalists or news reporters. So the idea would be, if I live in Edinburgh, I could go out with my camera and use the HAPS platform to stream a live video, say, here's the castle in the spring, or here's the castle in the winter, or Princes Street Gardens at Christmas, that sort of thing. And the focus was on almost like being a journalistic reporter. And I quite liked that. Now, funnily enough, Pascal, you sent me a message last weekend with pointing to a HAPS update, and it reminded me that it was about time that I actually registered for the platform and tried it out. And I really actually like what I see. Now, earlier on in the news, we talked about YouTube introducing this way of rewarding people called applause, where you can effectively clap and donate money to people, and of course the shorts as well. Now, HAPS is actually like a combination of a YouTube style platform where videos are hosted, but it also has all the live streaming technology that you would expect from something like StreamYard or Restream.io. So it's a combination of the two. So you could quite honestly just record a video on HAPS and upload it to HAPS and stay on there and be encapsulated within it, just like you are on YouTube. Or you could use that software to live stream to just about everything. So you could use the HAPS software to stream to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to Twitter, to Twitch, all of the usual live streaming destinations. And what I really like about it is the extras that you get, like being able to put lower thirds in and being able to suck in live chat literally onto the screen, as opposed to having to do it in a different location. And all of this at the moment is totally free. It has, from what I can see, it has at least all of the flexibility and the features as something like StreamYard, and yet it is free. Whether it'll stay free forever, I seriously doubt. But just looking at it, there are already some people on HAPS who don't look like your traditional YouTubers, but they've got lots of subscribers. And not only can you subscribe to someone in the way that you would do on YouTube, i.e. you just press a button and you're there, you actually can charge people to be subscribers. So I could charge somebody $1 a month or $5 a month or £10 a month to be a subscriber. Now, obviously, the content you put out is going to have to be pretty good to get people to subscribe, but that is an option. So it's actually a much deeper platform than I ever thought. I just thought, they've come up with this idea of encouraging people to be journalists, but it's like a TV studio, live streaming studio with all the kit you would expect. Plus, it's this whole YouTube style experience. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing at the moment.
I'm just so glad you actually mentioned haps.tv a second time. I think that's obviously in the spirit of this particular segment, because we're going to understand and discover more about some of those platforms. And for me, what I love is how they really feel and appear different to all the others.
Yeah, absolutely right. They've gone for that niche of the journalistic approach, but it's all the other features. And when I read out the bit about the applause on YouTube, that's a good thing. But actually, HAPS have been doing this right from their inception. They don't call it applause. You actually give people almost like coins, and you can actually buy coins to give people. So not only can you subscribe to people's channels, you can also donate, just almost like tips, I guess, applause, which is what the YouTube version is. So yeah, really, really interesting. I haven't actually used it to go live yet, because this week has been mainly just messing around with it, but I am going to give it a try, probably in my harbour trip down tomorrow morning, because to stay within the feel of the platform, I felt that I had to be outside showing people stuff, as opposed to being inside, sat here behind the computer.
Well, I'll be looking out for it.
Fantastic. Okay, Pascal, let's do what we always do at this part of the show. We fire up the flux capacitor, we dive into the DeLorean, we set the controls of the TARDIS, we head back in time for This Week in History.
In 1959, the Barbie doll makes its debut at the American Toy Fair in New York.
In 1961, George When I'm Cleaning Windows Formby sadly died. He was one of Britain's most popular entertainers, used to play the ukulele, and I included him in the news this week because he used to live next door but one to my grandfather.
Wow. Well, in 1985, Yul Brynner appears in his 4,500th performance of The King and I. He would star in a further 133 performances, the last one just 4 months before his death.
Goodness gracious. In 1983, the NASA space probe Pioneer 10 crosses the orbit of Neptune, becoming the first man-made object to leave the solar system. It was launched in 1972 and headed towards the red star Aldebaran.
Wow. Well, in 1989, the USSR's Phobos 2 enters a Martian's orbit on its way to the moon Phobos. The spacecraft never completed its mission as Mission Control lost contact in March 27th.
Yeah, those pesky Martians probably shot it down. In 1994, Apple launches their QuickTake 100 digital camera, one of the very first digital cameras aimed at the consumer market, which was a complete and utter flop, if I remember rightly.
In 2001, Donald Campbell's speedboat is recovered. Divers raise the wreck Bluebird from the bottom of Coniston Water in Cumbria.
And finally, in 2010, American director Catherine Bigelow became the first woman to win an Academy Award for Best Director for The Hurt Locker. Wow. So, Pascal, Yul Brynner and this film, The King and I mean, actually, it was the stage performance that he was renowned for, and I think the film of The King and I was made in something like 1958, and by then he had already clocked up thousands of performances on the stage, and in 1985, I think that was almost like a rerun or a reboot, if that was the right word, of the stage version of The King and I. I do remember quite liking that film. I mentioned my grandfather in relation to George Formby, but I'm pretty sure he bought me the soundtrack album to The King and I.
But you know what's incredible is when you look at the number. So by the time, sadly, he died rather young, 65 is to us is a young age, just, over the 4,500 mark. The diligence, the commitment to the story, to the character and so on I don't think it's been equaled since. I mean, I don't think actors, forgive me, would do that nowadays. We live in different times altogether.
I think he became so recognisable as the part of the king in the film, and on the stage play that they probably couldn't have run the stage play with anybody else. It just almost had to be Yul Brynner playing that role.
I mean, as a individual, as a professional, talk about personal branding. I mean, Yul Brynner, the name, the physicality, the way he stood out on screen. I mean, we know that the making of the Seven Mercenaries, or the Magnificent Seven, should I say, was fraught with tension because all those incredible actors, and what Yul Brynner said to them is, all I have to do is take my cowboy hat off, and then all eyes will be on me.
That's fantastic. Interesting couple of news items about spacecraft here. The one that went out beyond Neptune and the one that disappeared in orbit around Mars. Literally yesterday, the day before we recorded this episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast, was the landing of the robot rover actually on Mars. And I was watching on television last night some of the photos that it's already sending back. They look absolutely incredible. So whether, and I was joking, the Martians shot down the Phobos 2 thing back in 1989. Let's hope we get some fabulous footage back from the current rover.
Indeed, and we do mention Mars a lot, whether it's to do with the movie The Martian, which we reviewed, as well as that. But quick kind of aside for you about Mars. I think it was last year, my sister bought my nephew a birthday present, which was essentially a voucher whereby when the rover, would land on Mars, a message would be sent to him. So you could buy this gift, and presents. So sure enough, yesterday, my nephew Louis got a message, a picture with him in it, of essentially pretending he was next to the rover kind of vehicle. But he got a message from Mars as his birthday present.
Message from Mars. That is absolutely fabulous, isn't it? Absolutely fabulous. Great. So, Catherine Bigelow. I would have thought there had been a female director winning an Academy Award before 2010. I was quite shocked by that.
Yeah, shameful.
It took a long
Absolutely
time.
Shameful. I mean, she deserves it, and she's been an incredible film producer and director, and she's done some great work. But not acceptable in my view. To wait literally 2010. I mean, we've been making movies, give or take, for nearly a century now. So let's hope that things are still improving and will improve moving forward.
So Catherine Bigelow, what an amazing creator she is. And that leads us nicely into the next section of the show, which is our creators' shout-outs. And in this section of the show, Pascal and I give a shout out to one of our favourite creators. Now, most of the time, the creator is somebody within our immediate network, although sometimes we do stray outside that network and talk about people with even bigger influence. So, Pascal, who's on your radar this week?
Well, today I'm so pleased to introduce you and our viewers and listeners to Nick Redmond, the host of the Voice Coach podcast series. Now, Nick and I are a second level connection according to the LinkedIn definition. And I must once again thank Alan McGee, who is my contact on LinkedIn, for introducing me to Nick Redmond and her podcast. She is a coach, as I mentioned a moment ago, and she works with anyone who is a professional that needs the spoken word and spoken voice as a way of functioning, whether you're an actor, whether you're a speaker, whether you're a consultant, a coach, and so on. And what she's doing through her work, but also through this podcast, she's sharing her insight and knowledge about the mechanics of speech and voice and what you can do to essentially look after your voice. She talks about voice health, but she also gives you techniques to be a better speaker, a better kind of raconteur, and just holds an audience interest. Now, this is a new podcast series for her. It started roughly on the 24th of January, so there are now a handful of episodes, including how to warm up your voice in 5 minutes, top 5 microphone techniques tips, how to have good vocal health, which is a term that I never thought of, but of course, you and I would agree that on occasion, our vocal health is not as good as it could be, and it has an impact on our ability to work. But of course, you've got the top 5 tips for improving your speech, and so on and so forth. In the how to warm up your voice in 5 minutes, there's a fun exercise in there that you can do with her. And she also has a tongue twister, which is as follows. I'm going to try and do it well as one shot. So Benedict Cumberbatch broke a delicate luggage rack. Oh, I'm quite pleased with myself there. This is the one that she has. She has a few others in there. And what is lovely is she's clearly passionate about voice and the mechanics of voice. She really shares her, kind of advice with great enthusiasm. But also she has this, I must say, I don't mind me saying, this great voice, we'd expect that, and really charming kind of Irish tone to it as well, which is quite compelling. So really pleased to have added Nick Redmond's, Voice Coach podcast series on my Stitcher account, and I want others to do the same.
I'm going to listen to this, Pascal. I think that, you and I use our voice so much as part of our job, not only in this podcast, but when we do webinars, when we do stage presentations, whatever it might be, we're using our voice. And, I very rarely think about it. And I never really think, am I looking after my voice? Am I warming up properly? So, yeah, definitely need to give this a listen to and find out what she's got to say. So my creator shout out this week is actually for somebody that I've known for a good long time. His name is Kevin Carr. Now, he runs a PR agency within the financial services industry. And I've worked with Kevin many, many years and known him for many, many years. And currently we both work on a project called Protection Review. And we've mentioned that a few times on the podcast. And I've been going on at Kevin for a long time that he needs to start doing video. And he's finally put together a piece of video, and actually I hope it goes a bit viral. Now, Kevin is a bit of an expert in how to write entries for awards, business awards specifically. So, if you are wanting to enter a business awards, it doesn't really matter whether it's financial services or not, these tips will help. There are certain things you should do, and obviously a lot of things that you shouldn't do. And I've been a judge, and I still am a judge in several awards ceremonies, dinners, whatever you might call them. And to be perfectly honest, Pascal, some of the entries are just woeful, and they go straight in the bin pretty much within the first couple of lines. Kevin's put together the top 10 tips for writing better awards. It's his first video, and it's really good, and I love the gimmick where he effectively changes his clothes. I almost said costume then, but isn't it? He just changes his clothes and location for each of the tips. Just a bit of a fun gimmick, but it just made it stand out in my mind. So as always, I'll leave the link to that video in the show notes. But it's Kevin Carr, and if you are thinking about entering an award ceremony, entering your business for an award or your product for an award, give this video a watch. It's only 6 minutes, but it might be the difference between you winning and losing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger.
Excellent work. So, Pascal, what do you think? Time for film marketing? Imagine that you've just finished a piece of content and you're eager to get it out to the world, but it's going to take you at least 14 months to just polish it and make it fit for customer consumption. Would you think that that was a frustrating thing to happen? Well, today's film is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and post-production on this film took 14 months. And the reason why? Because they merged together live action with animation. Do you remember this one, Pascal?
I do remember it very well indeed. I remember going to the UGC complex in Bordeaux with friends and family and having the time of my life completely. But I just say as well that I'm almost so proud that for the Two Geeks and Marketing podcast, we've chosen this film, because by now, if people don't appreciate how much we adore filmmaking and film production, they should get it, with this choice today.
Yeah, I went to see it in Lancaster, of all places. But obviously at the time, it was just a fabulous, fun movie. And yes, we absolutely marvelled at the way that they had managed to merge together animated cartoons and real people. Now, I think up until that point, probably when I was younger, I'd been to see the original Mary Poppins film, and there was another film called Bedknobs and Broomsticks as well, which merged animation with live action. But the genius of this film, and if you look at those other two that I mentioned, is that you could tell that the scenes where the cartoons and the live people were merged together were very static and one dimension and two-dimensional, whereas in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it was the cartoons were being, they were zooming round them, they were zooming in them, they were circling up and down, they were bouncing shadows of light over them. There's one amazing scene where there's a light bulb swinging in the background, and you can see the shadows going across the cartoon's face. And here's the thing, Pascal, and I didn't realise this at the time, but this was one of the last animated films that was made where every single frame of the cartoons were individually hand-drawn and painted. That's why it took them 14 months.
And indeed, to that extent, that was this movie won 3 Oscars for obviously the best editing, the best sound effects, and the best kind of special effects. But there was also a special commendation for the animation team.
Yeah, I mean, it's just almost beyond comprehension, because now pretty much every animated film is done by computer. So I guess you could say it's a lot easier. I mean, it's still incredibly sophisticated, but imagine they had to draw every single frame of each character in that film, and every second of the film would have had 24 frames. So each of those 24 frames had to be slightly different to make the characters animate. And it was not only the character animation. Again, they had to paint in the shadows, they had to paint in the lighting, they had to paint in other cartoon characters in the background. And it just absolutely staggers me how much detail and painstaking detail was gone into with this. I mean, one of the joys of watching the film for me is actually pausing the video and see, oh look, you can see the seven dwarfs are in the back
Yeah.
of that scene, you know, only for a split second, but they had that vision that they wanted to try and include within the film somewhere pretty much every famous cartoon character there's ever been. And it's when you look at it from that point of view, it's unbelievably detailed.
Yeah, there's the same sense of wonder and enjoyment than when you first see Ready Player One. And you kind of can't quite believe, you know, all this reference to your childhood and indeed, you know, when you watch. But I think what was lovely as well, I mean, this is, if I'm not mistaken, Roger, a Disney production with a few other studios. But they also went, and I think that's one of the reasons why perhaps nowadays it's harder. They had this ability to bring, you know, cartoon characters from other studios, from Tex Avery to, you know, a few others, Looney Tunes, obviously, and Merry Melodies. So they could work in collaboration with other studios and other kind of IP centers, which I think would be much harder nowadays.
Yeah, and again, maybe that's why the movie was just so fabulous. I mean, obviously Roger Rabbit himself was a completely new creation, and you know, you can find articles on the internet to see that Roger Rabbit was almost an amalgamation of various things from other famous people, like the baggy trousers and the bow tie. You can find people who they tried to emulate there. But yeah, getting Donald Duck and Daffy Duck in the same film, Warner Brothers and Disney, as you've said, it just made it so special. You know, Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse side by side, but in character and the same voice actors and all of that.
And I just love, you know,
magical.
the whole concept of they live in Toontown, which is almost like a ghetto. They're being exploited, you know, by the producers, you know, and so on and so forth. And what was interesting for me, I would argue that one, the pleasure watching this film is multi-leveled. Obviously, there's adult humor as well as kids humor, and maybe was the first one to do it properly. But most of those characters, most of those cartoon characters, you and I would have seen them on the small screen up to that point. And for the first time ever, potentially, we saw them on the big screen in the context of a motion picture. But we must also spend a moment to really, really thank, you know, and congratulate the actors who had to act with nothing. And then, of course, you know, the cartoon characters were added later, but Bob Hoskins, you know, who's the lead character, Christopher Lloyd, and so on, they had to imagine being amongst all those characters, and then that was superimposed following, as you mentioned, 14 months of hard work.
And one of the articles that I read, Pascal, said that the director was absolutely specific that what would almost make the movie fail was if they got the eye lines wrong. So, you know, it's very, very rare. There's a couple of times within the film where Bob Hoskins isn't quite eye to eye with Roger Rabbit or the characters interacting with, but mainly, you could absolutely believe that it was genuinely acting with a cartoon. But of course, as you say, in real life he was acting to nothing. Maybe there was a stick man or a model or something that he was playing to, but genuinely they had to get those eye lines absolutely and utterly spot on. One of the other things which I read, which I thought was fabulous, was and you said this is a Disney movie, but actually it was put out as a Touchstone movie because I think some of the high-ups at Disney felt that it strayed just a little bit too far into adult humour. And I'm sure, I might be wrong, but I'm sure that one of the lines is that a rabbit in your pocket or are you just pleased to see me? And they obviously felt that it might have tarnished Disney's white image, wholesome image, if they'd have associated themselves. It's a bit of a shame because it was so full of Disney characters.
But again, what you were saying, so you've got that humor. For me, you're right, 3-dimensional. So the actors, or real life actors, move around, and everything moves around them as well. There's a real interaction with the world of Toontown. But also, what I loved about it was it is a complex story, and it's also using all the archetypes of the 1940s noir detective stories. So we've got Bob Hoskins, who plays the character of Eddie Valiant. Of course, he's a hero. Who eventually will be up against Judge Doom. So if you're not sure he's the bad guy with a name like that, such as this one, and he has all this interaction, but that famous scene, which you see in all the kind of black and white detective stories of the temptress, the seductress, entering the detective kind of crumbling office and giving him a contract where he's imperiled. Some elements of Chinatown in this, some elements of, many movies you've seen with Humphrey Bogart and so on. On that subject, of course, when the movie was out, we were all saw for the very first time Jessica Rabbit.
Oh yes, I mean, she was drawn in such a way, wasn't she? I mean, I'm not mean. I'm just drawn this way, but yeah. So many young lads always had a crush on a cartoon character. It's absolutely. But I mean, again, that the animation. I think the scene where she's singing in the bar, the animation of her dress, which was sparkling with glitters, they had to animate every single little light spot from multiple directions. Again, it brings us back to that whole idea of the staggering amount of detail. And I guess that, for content creators like ourselves, we say this about a lot of films, Pascal, but this one has to be almost like at the pinnacle of detail and the pinnacle of painstaking attention to detail. And if you've got that vision and the wherewithal to carry it out, it just shows you what you can achieve.
And I think for me, we didn't know in 1998 that this was, the best almost, and there would be no others to come after, because ultimately you do assume, no matter the genre that you favor when it comes to film, that the next iteration, the next exploration of that theme will be better because of access to more technology, to better ways to produce, and so on and so forth. But actually, whilst there was some close call with things like Space Jam, or you could argue there was some interesting things explored with the Incredibles and so on, I think that nothing has been as good as this one since then.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Pascal. And I'm trying to think back now to the marketing of the film. And, 1988, I was just out of university. I can't really think. I know that there was a lot of hype around the film. I know that the mix of live and cartoon, they really bigged that up. There was a lot of programs in advance on TV showing clips of it. So there was a massive expectation that it was going to be a good film. But any lessons that you think we can draw from this?
Difficult to extract myself from how fun the film was, but yes, let's talk about marketing. So you had obviously the marketing pack, the media pack that was put into motion. What is interesting to observe for me is in and around the release. So we saw this film certainly in the UK was released in the December of 1998, which actually is quite late because it was released in the summer in the US, and actually we had it in October-ish in France. So I'm just perplexed about the UK release being so late, but that makes it for a perfect Christmas movie to go and see with the family. But what was interesting, in addition to the marketing machine, this movie was then mentioned for the technology. So then you had programs on TV and magazines talking about the film from a technology point of view, so reaching, I would argue, an additional new audience. We had a TV series looking into science on French TV called Time X, where they were talking about how incredible achievement of that film. So you're watching a movie about science and technology, and the movie was being mentioned. So the behind the scene, I think, element of the marketing was also very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely right. Remember that. I'm sure it was something like Tomorrow's World, Pascal, or something like that, talking about how they made this film. And then, of course, the DVDs came later, the VHS tape came, the DVDs came. And you know, one of the things that absolutely blew me away when the DVD came out was that, you know, at the beginning of the film, the first 5 minutes of the film is actually a Roger Rabbit cartoon. So it's baby Herman's trying to get the cookies on top of the fridge, and Roger's trying to protect him, and just about every implement within the kitchen either falls on his head or spikes him, or, you know, all those cartoon pratfalls and this, that and the other. And of course, after those 5 minutes, you realise that it's actually them filming a cartoon. But on the DVD, there were at least another 3 Roger Rabbit entire cartoons that they had made. Now, I think that those cartoons actually ran in cinemas, almost like extended adverts for the film at the time it was released. And of course, they ended up being fabulous Easter eggs on the and extras on the DVD. But to think that they even went to the extent of creating 3 more 5-6 minute cartoons in addition to the film. Again, incredible attention to detail. And
it reminded me, first time I went to see this at the movies, I was perplexed by the beginning of thinking, hang on a minute, I saw the trailer. They're meant to be real people there as well, because it's quite a lengthy cartoon you see at the very beginning before someone goes, cut, and then suddenly the camera turns to real life environment. I was thinking, this is wrong. I was kind of being quite perplexed by the whole thing. But on that point, just reading about some of the trivia that one can consult on the web about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, not only was it at the time, perhaps still is one of the most expensive, obviously, film production of all time, but one of the longest, but also to be able to thank everybody that was involved in the movie. It had the longest closing credits of all times as well.
That's a new. I didn't know that. That's a fabulous.
Well, just to your point, Roger, about trailers you have the same name as a film. Just came to me all those artists who had to create frame-by-frame images of all the different characters. There was a lot of people involved, as well as obviously the normal crew that we'd expect from a film a production.
Yeah, you when you think about that army of people painstakingly drawing 24 frames a second, it just absolutely utterly boggles the mind. One of the best films of all time, and I say this every single time we review a film, Pascal, on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, but it is definitely one for us to watch. I don't actually think that I've got the DVD. I think I bought it on VHS originally, and the VHS is obviously long since gone. So it's probably one I'm going to have to either buy the Blu-ray now, and hopefully those 3 shorts will still be on there, or even download a digital copy. But I want to see it again soon in 4K, hopefully, pristine, beautiful. That
would be very interesting. And again, to our viewers and listeners, if you've not seen the film, don't discount it because it was made literally for some of us, a century ago, or last century, should I say. It really is a story well told. It's really quite witty. If you know just enough about the world of cartoons, you're going to get plenty for the eyes and the ears. But I love also the setting of the 1940s Los Angeles and everything that comes with it. It's just a great experience to share with others as well.
Yeah, and it's a film for everybody, Pascal. All ages can enjoy it. It's definitely a film to watch with the family. It's definitely a film to watch on your own. There's elements of romance in it. There's elements of danger. Yeah, good all-round film. But again, that attention to detail for us marketers is the thing that sticks out for me. Oh my goodness, Pascal, another fabulous episode. And I got so excited when I knew that we were going to be talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Listen, everyone, thank you so much for watching the latest episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, or listening to it if that's the way you like to consume your podcasts. If you've got any questions or any comments about what we've been talking about today, just get in touch with us on the YouTube site or look us up on Twitter. And if you do want to subscribe, we'd be absolutely delighted. You can find the podcast in all the usual places. So really, all that's left to say is Thanks for watching and thanks for listening, and until next time, go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.